Everyone saw Epstein fall. Everyone thought the empire around him would crumble. They were wrong. Behind the scenes, wealth and power never paused. The network didn't flinch. The machine kept running. Deals were still made. Influence shifted quietly. And the people who mattered? They stayed invisible.
Jeffrey Epstein. Is it true, sir, that...
To understand this, you first have to look at how wealth and power are intertwined at the highest levels. Epstein was connected to some of the most influential figures on the planet. Billionaires, corporate magnates, political players. Public reporting by the Miami Herald and Vanity Fair shows that these relationships were built on mutual benefit, often financially, sometimes socially, and always strategically. The man who appeared in photographs with famous faces was just a single node in a network designed to operate beyond public scrutiny. This network was resilient because it was layered. At the top, there were the ultra-wealthy individuals who moved with discretion. Beneath them were advisors, lawyers, bankers, and institutions that ensured that influence and wealth could continue to circulate even if a single person was removed. Offshore accounts, trusts, and shell companies acted as invisible arteries, moving resources efficiently and quietly. For anyone outside the inner circle, these structures are almost impossible to trace in real time. When Epstein died, these layers were tested, but they did not break. Banks continued to process transactions. Law firms continued to manage trusts. Investments continued to grow. Influence persisted. Because the system was never dependent on a single man, it was designed to function autonomously. The shock was absorbed, attention shifted, and the machinery carried on. One of the most interesting aspects of this network is how visibility and invisibility coexist. Epstein was visible. He was photographed, documented, and reported on. But the people who truly maintained the power were often invisible. They moved quietly, restructuring, redirecting influence, and ensuring continuity. This is a lesson in resilience. The more powerful the network, the less dependent it is on its most visible member.
Cause affidavit. One witness described your penis as oval-shaped and claimed when erect it was thick towards the bottom but was thin and small towards the head portion and called it egg-shaped. Those are not my words, I apologize. But as
financial mechanisms were key. Reports in Vanity Fair highlight how offshore accounts and complex corporate structures allowed influence to travel across borders without interruption. Epstein's role was often to facilitate introductions, manage social logistics, and coordinate certain financial flows. Remove him, and the network didn't stop. It rerouted. It relied on multiple intermediaries who were themselves wealthy, powerful, and discreet. It is a system built to outlive its nodes. Consider how institutions contributed to this endurance. Banks, law firms, and investment firms were not just facilitators, they were shields. They provided continuity even as investigations and scandals unfolded. A public figure might falter under scrutiny, but the system that supported them continued operating. When headlines screamed about a fall from grace, the legal and financial apparatus ensured that operations remained uninterrupted. Influence is not fragile. It is layered and insulated. Beyond the financial structures, social networks played a crucial role. Philanthropic boards, private events, and high-level gatherings created overlapping webs of legitimacy and access. These networks were not dependent on visibility. They thrived in secrecy. Epstein's presence might have made the connections more visible to journalists, but the networks themselves existed independently. Remove him, and they adapted seamlessly. Even elite philanthropy acted as a stabilizer. Donations and board memberships intertwined wealth with influence, creating durable bonds. These bonds did more than secure access. They reinforced loyalty and discretion. Influence, in this sense, is not transactional in the short term. It is structural. The network doesn't just survive, it evolves. Legal frameworks further ensured continuity. Trusts, foundations, and corporate entities allowed the network to redistribute risk while maintaining control. Epstein's fall highlighted how these structures could protect wealth and influence simultaneously. Public scrutiny might focus on individuals, but the underlying system remained resilient, built to withstand exposure and adapt to shocks. After Epstein's death, these legal buffers ensured that litigation, exposure, or scrutiny did not destabilize the larger network. Accounts could be frozen, assets reassigned, and operations continued without revealing the full scope of the system. In elite circles, legal continuity is a tool for power, and Epstein's network was proof of that. The adaptive nature of the network is clear in its geographic distribution. Individuals and institutions were never centralized. Influence flowed across continents, between cities, private islands, and corporate offices. Epstein may have been a connecting point in certain social contexts, but the network itself was global and decentralized. Remove a node, and others pick up the connections. This is the power of redundancy. Even the most visible interactions, the private jets, the lavish estates, the exclusive events, were carefully designed to maintain plausible deniability. Access and influence were codified in actions and relationships that could be interpreted in multiple ways. This ambiguity acted as a shield, preserving the network even when one member faced intense scrutiny. Epstein's visibility was a distraction, not a weakness. Continuity also depended on human behavior. Billionaires and elite players are aware that visibility carries risk. They move strategically, creating multiple contingencies for every interaction. Social media, private correspondence, and public appearances are all managed carefully. When Epstein became a liability, others adapted immediately, ensuring that influence and opportunity remained intact. The network is dynamic because its members are proactive, not reactive. The New York Times reporting on Epstein's connections shows how the network maintained its influence across politics, finance, and culture. Even as investigations unfolded, the institutions and individuals connected to him continued to operate with precision. Boards met, investments grew, philanthropy continued. The machinery of power kept running. This illustrates the difference between individual exposure and systemic resilience. One of the most fascinating aspects is how wealth creates insulation. Legal, financial, and social structures are leveraged to protect influence from public disruption. Epstein's death may have been sensational, but it was a test of the network's resilience, not a collapse. The system passed that test. Transactions continued. Access remained. Influence persisted. Power moved silently, efficiently, and without interruption. Elite continuity is another factor. Wealthy individuals operate in environments where they are accustomed to risk, scrutiny, and operational complexity. They have advisors, managers, and teams dedicated to preserving influence. Remove a public figure, and these teams restructure operations. The result is that the network maintains equilibrium. The fall of a single node is a disturbance, but it is absorbed. The network does not falter. Even after extensive reporting and public outrage, the network's visible members continue to thrive. While journalists chase sensational stories, the underlying mechanisms of influence are quietly maintained. Wealth, access, and social leverage continue to operate independently of public perception. This is why the network survived Epstein, because it was always bigger than him. Financial continuity is critical. Trusts, offshore accounts, and corporate structures allow for discrete wealth movement. Legal protections ensure that transactions continue even under scrutiny. When Epstein's personal exposure became a liability, the money flows were unaffected. The infrastructure had been designed to be insulated from the fall of any single individual. Institutions themselves are resilient because they are experienced in managing high-profile clients. Law firms, banks, and investment companies have decades of experience navigating scandal. They provide operational continuity, even as individual reputations fluctuate. The network is less about personalities and more about systemic function. Epstein's presence was merely a convenience, not a necessity. Networks adapt socially as well. Philanthropic boards, private events, and exclusive gatherings create durable social bonds that outlast individual members. Influence persists because the relationships are not tied to visibility or notoriety. Remove Epstein, and the network recalibrates. Connections shift, but access and control remain intact. Epstein's nodes were replaceable. The network is global, spread across continents, institutions, and individuals. Influence moves through legal, financial, and social channels that do not depend on a single person. The fall of a visible figure is absorbed by the system, which continues to function efficiently and quietly. Even the subtle aspects of elite coordination play a role. Timing of public appearances, strategic philanthropy, and discreet management of relationships all ensure resilience. Epstein's death may have been sudden, but the system adapted immediately. Influence did not stop. Money did not stop. Connections did not stop. The machinery continued, almost as if nothing had happened. The more you look at it, the more obvious it becomes. Epstein was visible, expendable, and sensational. The network was invisible, resilient, and operational. Power, in this context, is not dependent on spectacle. It is durable because it is systemic. Remove one member, and others adapt. The network moves forward, quietly, efficiently, and without interruption. Billionaires and institutions operate with this understanding. Visibility is temporary. Influence is permanent. Epstein's fall tested the system, but it did not break it. Banks continued to function. Law firms continued to manage assets. Philanthropic and social networks continued to maintain bonds. The system is larger than any one individual, built to outlive scandal and insulated from attention. Even in the face of congressional inquiries, investigative journalism, and public outrage, the network adapts. Legal frameworks, financial structures, and social bonds create a resilient matrix that preserves influence. Epstein's death was a node removed, not a network destroyed. The machinery of elite power continued moving as quietly and efficiently as before. Ultimately, this is the central truth. Epstein was a visible face, a node, a facilitator. But he was not the foundation. The foundation is the network. Financial, legal, social, and institutional structures designed to endure scrutiny, scandal, and even death. Remove him, and the system continues. Wealth moves. Influence persists. Connections remain. Epstein may have been the most visible part of the network, but he was not its foundation. The foundation is money, influence, institutions, and social connections that operate beyond scrutiny. When one node falls, the network absorbs the shock, recalibrates, and moves forward. Epstein's death revealed the resilience of power, not its fragility. This is how the billionaire network survived. Because it was systemic, adaptive, and almost impossible to disrupt. Headlines fade. Investigations continue. Public outrage subsides. Yet the underlying structures of influence endure. The system is larger than any individual, and that is why it moved on, quietly, efficiently, and without faltering.